Coming up on today's show, the top 10 EVs you can buy with more than 200 miles range, why Volkswagen says it's going to make its own batteries, and Tesla applies for a new series of patents all about autopilot hardware 3.0. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening. In fact, wherever you are in the world, welcome to EV News Daily. It's your weekend edition, Saturday 26th of January. It's Martyn Lee here. I've been through all the EV stories that I can find today. Really busy day as well. And picked out the ones you need to know about. As always, thank you to myev.com for helping make the show. If you haven't checked them out yet and you're in the USA, go to myev.com. You'll learn about buying, learn about selling, and in fact, generally learn about EVs on there. It's a free marketplace, totally free, and it connects you with the buyer or the seller that's out there, somewhere, the perfect person for you to do some business with. Your weekend watch, then, my recommendations. A couple of weekend watches that you could have a look at. Actually, maybe three, but I've only got a clip of two of them. The first one is a review of the Hyundai KONA from a Canadian car dealer. And sometimes dealers aren't always the most educated on EVs, but this guy certainly is.
All right, so if we're driving and we hold down the left paddle, not touching the brake, the vehicle will actually come to a stop.
And next, the Kia Niro EV, its stablemate, if you like, gets driven in the French Riviera. And again, not by an EV YouTuber, not by someone who typically reviews electric vehicles. So it's always good to get a sense of someone's take on an EV.
Because it's electric, it is very quiet, but there's not much wind whistle coming through either. So the car overly is relaxing, chilled, soft, but do not expect the kind of cocoon softness. This car feels actually quite sporty for an electric car. I think this is exactly what Kia wanted to build. Not overly soft and large, big SUV. No, actually quite a zippy and nifty SUV, which is exactly what a Kia Niro is.
Now, the other video I was going to mention, by the way, I haven't got a clip of it, but it's a new Bjorn Nyland video that's come out, and it's just a short video of him taking back the Audi e-tron that he's been testing for 3 days, and he's swapping it out for a Hyundai Kona. By the way, Bjorn is on a real purple patch of having some great cars on his channel, and his YouTube channel is really growing, and it's just essential viewing at the moment. But he says, I'll tell you my thoughts on the Audi e-tron on November the 22nd or 27th, I forget. I watched this video earlier and I was thinking, if I can recommend that to watch, because it's interesting, but pick out that bit from it. He was very specific on the date that he's allowed to publish his video about the Audi e-tron. That tells me there's either an embargo, a media embargo, or a gentleman's agreement, or something is preventing him, because he's got the videos done now. He's done his 3-day review. He would post them on his channel, but he can't. Well, he didn't say that I'm not allowed to, but he just said, you'll hear about that on November. And it was such a specific date. It wasn't a kind of normal speech pattern, if you like, of him saying, when I get round to editing them. So I reckon that probably that date is when you'll see a bunch. That's when Fully Charged will be allowed to publish theirs, and the newspapers and the magazines as well. I don't know. I'm guessing. But you never know. I mean, I'm getting a feeling that might be the date we see a lot of these YouTube videos hit the net with real reviews of the Audi e-tron, which you would think tie in to the first customer deliveries, which they do say are meant to be January or February here in Europe. So, I mentioned the top 10 models that you can buy right now with more than 200 miles on a charge. This is a list put together by myev.com, a team that helped make this show, so that's interesting to have a look at there. Actually, you know what? Their article is the top 8 models, but let me explain my thinking in a moment. Here's their top 8. Number 8, the Nissan Leaf E+. I think technically called the 3.0 or 3.0 E+. But anyway, 226 miles from its 62 kilowatt-hour battery. In 7th place, they put the Jaguar I-Pace on 234 miles. In 6th place, they put the Chevrolet Bolt at 238 miles. Add 10 miles to that, and you get their 5th place position, the Audi e-tron. Moving up to the Hyundai Kona and a recently reduced range here in the UK because they made some administrative errors in the test cycle. But on the EPA, it's 258 miles. In 3rd place, they list the Tesla Model X with 295 miles. The Tesla Model 3 is in 2nd place with 310 miles. And again, that's a a range that Tesla have voluntarily lowered. I think the EPA range is higher, but manufacturers can, if they want, lower it from... And so that's why the Model 3 is always listed as 310 miles, even though it'll do more. And in the first place, they listed the Tesla Model S on 335 miles. I would add into that list, though, the Kia eNiro, the stablemate of the Hyundai KONA. And what about the Kia Soul EV? That's coming with a 64 kilowatt-hour battery sometime later this year. Now, I wonder why it's not on the list. Maybe it's because you can't buy it right now. Or maybe it's because, as someone in the US said to me recently, they called it a compliance car. Let me assure you, the Kia Soul EV is not a compliance car. They don't just make a few of them in order to carry on selling their fossil cars in California, for instance. No. It's a car that perhaps just isn't sold in big enough numbers, but don't get that confused with being the definition of a compliance car. Hopefully with that Kia Soul EV and the, frankly, massive battery, 64 kilowatt hour, in a pretty small form factor, a pretty small car, much smaller than the big SUVs that otherwise would, that battery, you'd find that in. So it's looking really attractive, actually. And the Kia Soul is going to be a pretty affordable price as well. I'll put a link to myev.com in the show notes. Here's a really interesting survey that came out today. Around half of drivers want to become more environmentally friendly sometime in 2019. Many of them are planning to change the way they use their cars or buy a more economical vehicle. That's the conclusion of research by the used car website AA Cars. It surveyed more than 22,000 drivers, says James Fosdyke, writing for Motor1.com today. Well, this poll revealed that 50% of motorists wanted to change their driving habits in some way, with many making changes to their driving habits. 1 in 5 of them would do that by using their car less, ditching their wheels for journeys when they could walk or cycle. And around 1 in 10, it was about 9% actually, said they planned to buy an EV in the coming months. I'll put a link to the Motor1.com article in the show notes. Moving on to Volkswagen. And Volkswagen's been trying to claw back its credibility with an ambitious commitment to EVs ever since its $18.2 billion emissions scandal fine. Its lofty production goals aside, the German manufacturer's latest green move could see it kickstart Europe's car battery industry, according to Engadget. In back-to-back announcements today, VW said it will start building car batteries and recycling old cells in particular. Mobile EV charging stations being the results of that, heading onto the streets of its hometown in Wolfsburg in the first half of this year. VW promised to pump $870 million into their battery venture by 2020. Well, VW said this today in a statement. The changeover from conventional powertrains to e-mobility is an issue that is more important for the group components than any other part of the VW group, as the new brand produced more than 10 million conventional engines and 8 million gearboxes in 2018. Battery systems now are going to be developed and produced at the Brunswick components plants. In future, the production portfolio will include batteries for the MEB platform. Batteries, when they reach the end of their life in vehicles, will be transferred to other applications, like the new products such as flexible fast charging stations. End quote. So there's a couple of things in there that I'll just pull out. Firstly, the quote that they made 10 million engines last year and 8 million gearboxes. And sometimes I have to be reminded, I'm sure you don't mind the occasional reminder as well, that some of these really big car makers are dealing with some really big numbers for their piston cars they're making, and you can't just flick a switch and overnight move to all EVs. There's got to be a transition phase. I'd love it to be quicker. I'm trying to get into the minds and the heads of these really big investments that they're having to make and maybe be more sympathetic at times as well. The other thing that I'll pull out from that as well is talking about second life batteries, taking cells out of batteries that are at the end of their life in cars and then reusing them in mobile fast charging stations. That makes a great press release, by the way. It makes a great headline and it gets you in the news. But really, when are we going to see those products? Because year after year after year, different car makers, different companies talk about second life batteries, and it's simply not an industry that is worthwhile of any scale at the moment because the batteries well, they're too darn good. There aren't many EVs, by the way, that are no longer on the road simply because the battery has stopped working. Now, I know there's plenty of batteries out there with degradation in very hot climates, for instance, and some batteries not coping as well as others. But how many batteries have really been taken out of cars and made into Second Life products? Those kind of initiatives that are going on are still pretty small scale, pretty niche. It is happening, but not on the scale that people talk about. Was it Daimler had a program? They had a home storage program. Their battery packs for your home were designed really nice, actually, but they shut that down last year because I imagine not a core part of their business, didn't need to be focusing on that. I think that involved Second Life batteries as well. It sounds like a very green, wonderful thing to do, but the batteries that are out there in EVs are still going strong. Don't tell the fossil car lovers. Well, moving on to Hyundai and the IONIQ. And just a week ago, Hyundai began selling its 2019 IONIQ, which got a bit of a facelift, a bit of an update in other CARB states, apart from just California. According to a recent story, though, by Cars Direct, within 3 days of the expansion of sales into other states around the US, they did bump the price by $500, says Stephen Loveday at InsideEVs.com. The price increase makes the IONIQ Electric now more expensive than its direct rival, the 2019 Nissan Leaf, the 40 kilowatt-hour version. The Leaf starts at $29,990 with about a $1,000 destination charge. That puts it at about just under $31,000. Which is about $350 less than the Hyundai. The IONIQ Electric priced at $30,700. Now, the MSRP has gone up to $31,235. They have had a little adjustment on the price by also updating the car as well. By the way, new battery coming. That has now been... The rumours have been circulating for goodness knows how long, actually. Getting stronger last year, but now we've had it confirmed that the IONIQ battery... I'm still not sure the exact size. It's around 40. Maybe 40 to 42, I think, is going to be the new pack inside the IONIQ coming out later this year. A very, very efficient car. Well, moving on to some of the really clever stuff that Tesla is working on, and an important new product that it claims will enable them to bring full self-driving to its vehicles. Nobody mentioned the promises made over the years to self-drive a Tesla from one side of the US to another. Those claims have rather gone a bit quiet, actually, and you know, maybe it wasn't a boast that needed to be made at the time, but anyway, the new AI chip or neural net accelerator. It's going to be released in the Autopilot hardware version 3.0 upgrade, according to Fred at Electrek. Fred says, we've now uncovered a series of new patent applications from Tesla about the brand new computer. As previously reported, Tesla hired a team of chip architects and executives from AMD back in 2016, now led by the former Apple chip designer Peter Bannon, to deliver the new computer to power Tesla's self-driving system. Going to be a GPU, not a CPU, by the way. For any hardware geeks, will know that a GPU, graphics processor, can handle multiple operations at the same time and is far more suited to something like those number crunching, those big data sets that will be involved in the AI and self-driving. Now, one of the comments from a commenter called Preston Crow details why he thinks that the patent has now been filed. It indicates, he says, they're about to start shipping the new computer with new cars. Once you start shipping, there's a limit on how long you can wait to file a patent on the technology. In some places, it's 6 months. In others, it's a year. Also, remember, the middle of next week is the Q4 earnings call with the investors and Elon and the rest of the senior managers on that call. Some things are a coincidence and other things are done for a reason. And I will add my 2 cents in here. I'll be listening very, very closely on that earnings call for any mention of hardware version 3, of the neural net, of artificial intelligence, and they could be getting some of this public information out there ahead of the earnings call. Well, on to a German joint venture between Bosch and Daimler. And the German auto parts maker Bosch today announced that they have exercised an option in the agreement between those two companies to buy out Daimler from their joint project, which was called EM Motive. Now, EM Motive makes motors. They make the motors which power many EVs, not just Daimler's, by the way. A Thomson Reuters report said that EM Motive, currently supplying motors for Daimler, for Porsche, Fiat, Volvo, Peugeot, and the startup car maker Street Scooter with custom-made electric motors. He wants to carry on targeting new customers, Bosch said. Daimler said that EM Motive will remain the supplier that it continues to source electric motors from. They do have a number of suppliers worldwide, by the way. Daimler's workers have campaigned to bring development and production of their electric motors in-house, ending their reliance on external suppliers. And that's really interesting, isn't it? And it kind of fascinates me, but I don't understand enough about this. The supply chains that are so kind of well oiled over decades of making fossil cars, where all of these big car makers knew exactly who was going to make this widget, that nut, that bolt, that steering wheel, that indicator switch, and in many ways, that engine sometimes, or those engine parts, that wiring loom, for instance. And now, with EVs, you have the cells make up the battery, and then you've got some ancillaries, inverters, and some technical stuff, and then you've got the motor, and really, you've got the software. And you want to have as much control over all of that stuff as you possibly can. Everything else that is generic, the headlights, the seats, all that kind of stuff, they know. Like, they've got, these legacy automakers have got so much experience of doing that, way better than any startup. But it's the bits they haven't got the familiarity with that's interesting to watch. Are some of them going to outsource it? Are some of them going to buy the cells in and make their own battery packs? Are some of them just going to buy battery packs in? Super, super interesting. So from 4 wheels to 2 wheels, let's talk about electric motorcycles. I really love the videos that you can catch online, by the way, made by Micah. Now, Micah Toll has a YouTube channel called E-Bike School, and it's one of the things that I want to do. I've been wanting to do for ages, and I really must get around to it in the next couple of weeks, and that is build my wife an electric bike. Now, I bought her a new bike for Christmas. That was the Christmas present that she wanted, and in fairness, I did owe her a bike, because when we moved house recently, her old one was so rusty, when she asked me where it was, I had to confess I took it down the dump, because she never rode it because it was so rusty, so I binned it. Well, I recycled it, so I took it to the metal recycler, but without her knowing. So she goes, right, well, I'd like a new one, please. Which is indeed her prerogative. So she has a new bike now, and you know what? I would love to make it electric as a project, maybe even do a bit of YouTube stuff. So that's going to be my plan, to watch plenty more of Micah's videos and re-educate myself on buying maybe off eBay, sort of a Chinese front wheel with a motor and stuff in. Anyway, that's for another time. But he also writes these days for Electrek as a contributor. In an article today about Lightning motorcycles, he said that with impressive specs like 150 mile an hour top speed, that's 241 kilometers per hour, and a 150 mile range, that's 242 mile range, and it's got DC fast charging as well, 35 minutes to get full, and a base price of, get this, the Lightning motorcycle, $12,998, $13,000 for their model called the Lightning Strike. It's received plenty of praise so far, and despite the only image of it being the front headlights, people have seen no more of it, but they love it. In a surprise move, they're now reacting to that customer interest. The company announced today they'll start taking orders with just a $500 deposit. Some people say, oh, these companies take pre-orders to make money out of people. Well, it's only $500, and it means you get your name on the list when they finally start making them. While they were at it, by the way, Electrek looked at the other EV bike makers out there. Italian company Energica has been making EV bikes for years, a number of high-performance ones as well that do over 150 miles an hour. There's also Harley-Davidson. Their electric bike is called the Livewire, and it just began pre-sales, though the price is Harley-Davidson price, $30,000. The upcoming Zero Motorcycles SRF is still a bit of a mystery, but it could be a direct competitor to the Lightning Strike. The New York-based Tarform as well is also working on an electric motorcycle, which could compete in a similar price. So $10,000 to $14,000 seems to be a sweet spot for many, apart from Harley-Davidson, to have electric motorbikes in that kind of area. Like I say, before on the podcast, I've mentioned this. I'm not allowed to ride on two wheels. I used to ride ride bikes and off-road. I used to do off-road bikes and stuff. But Mrs. Lee doesn't feel it's appropriate. And if it's the only non-negotiable we have in our marriage that she doesn't want me on two wheels, well, I can live with that one thing. However, I'd love to give these bikes a try. You can read Micah's article in the show notes that I will put in there. Hey, you got one more day to get your question of the week answer sent in on email or the comments, and it's set by myev.com as always. It's this: what's the best way for you to get your first experience of driving an EV? If you've never driven an EV or you're a non-EV owner, what's the best way that you think you could get your bum in that seat, to get your hands behind the wheel, to get the thrill of silent motoring? Is it a test drive, maybe an experience centre or some sort of place you could go to that was like no pressure, hard sell kind of thing? You could just go and maybe a test drive day. I've seen these all around the world where different owners groups take their cars along on a runway or something, or a private road, and let other people try them. And if you are an EV driver, thinking back to when you first drove an EV, what was the experience like? How would you have changed it? So if you could wave a magic wand, what would you do differently? Email hello@evnewsdaily.com. That's hello@evnewsdaily.com. And you can leave a comment on myev.com, or you can go to the YouTube or Facebook comments. Thank you very much to 178 patrons of the podcast. Thanks to their support, you get to listen to this. Hopefully you learn a few things, a little bit of entertainment along the way as well, if you're lucky. And by no means do you have to do the Patreon thing. I'll make the show whatever, by the way. There's never any pressure. If I can add your name to the lists, I'd invite you to check out patreon.com, patreon.com/EVNewsDaily. Most people sign up at about $10 a month. Actually, it's sort of 50-50. It's $5 or $10, and then there's a few people who are super generous. And thank you very much to everybody. But like $10 is like a super posh coffee once a month, and you get to make this show every single day for thousands of people around the world to learn about EVs and spread the word. You never know. Maybe someone, after listening to this podcast, might even get into an EV themselves. That'd be a job done mission for me. Thank you very much to our premium partners of the show. Phil Roberts from Electric Future here in the UK, ef.energy. Hello to electricmotoring.net. If you fancy getting behind the wheel of a Tesla, they've got a few on offer as well, by the way. Check out electricmotoring.net in the Chicago area on holiday or flying through for business. You want to check them out. And Brad Crosby as well, getting towards first month of Brad being a premium partner of the show. Hello to our partners as well, David Allen, who's always very supportive of this podcast. Thank you, David. To OEM Audio of New Zealand and evpower.co.nz if you want your accessories in New Zealand. Hello to Sasha Pallenberg as well. And John, who is otherwise known as Beardy McBeardface on Twitter. And the executive producers of the show. I like to give you guys a mention every Saturday as a thank you from me to you. Alan Robson at Scottish EV Owner, Harold Gear-Skalsveen, Ashley Hill, Bjard Fuchstak, Bob Muir from GingerComputers.com in Dundee, Borislav Borisov, Brent Kingsford, Brian Weatherall, Brian Young, who has a new podcast out, by the way, called ComfT.show. And I did listen to it, and it's all about servers and things. Look, I understood when he said RJ45. I've seen that. Seen one of those at work. My computer plugs into it. But I listened to it anyway. It's like 20 minutes of server talk, which it was just interesting listening to two experts talk about something that I had no idea about. Check out ComfT.show, CONFT.show for Brian's new podcast. This is Archer Hillo, Chris Benson, Chris Hopkins, Damian Davis, Darren Bird, Darren Sant, Dave Jewson, David Finch, David Partington, David Prescott and Dirk Rudsatz. Hello to Don McAllister from ScreencastsOnline.com, Frederick Rovick, George Clargo, Jack Oakley, Jason Fan, Jeff Urbis, Jerry Allison, John Bailey, John Nodal and John Timmis. Hello to Ken Morris, Kevin Mayerson, Lars Dallager, Lawrence D. Allen, Louis Hopkin and Luke Cully, Marcel Lohman, Marcel Ward, Martin Croft, Matthew Ellis, Matthew Gribby, Maz Shah, Mike Rogers. Hello to Neil E. Roberts and the whole gang, Sussex EVs. Paul Seeger-Smith, Paul Stevenson, Pete Glass, Philippe Calvet, Raj Badwell, Renee Schneider, Rod James, Rupert Mitchell, Sarah McCann. Hello, Scott Callahan, Seiki Payne, The Limousine Line in Sydney, Walter McVeigh, who I follow on Twitter a lot, and Zach Hurst. Thank you to all of you for being executive producers. Well, there are 368 previous episodes in the archive, and they'll stay online. Thank you to your support on Patreon is how I get to spend that kind support, by making sure that all of that is online as a resource for anyone to download at any time for free. If you hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast platform, I put the audio on YouTube as well, and you can subscribe on there. Then you get the podcast first and free and automatically. And if you could take 2 minutes to leave a little review on your favourite platform, that really helps out the old algorithms in terms of recommending this show to current non-listeners. If you want to say hi on the socials and catch up with me over the weekend, search EV News Daily. In the meantime, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.